Everyone, I'm Meredith Rowe. Thanks, Mariana, for the introduction, and Tim and everybody for organizing. It's really great to be here. I'm going to talk for just about 10 minutes, looking forward to sharing some of my work with you related to this topic of language development and parent-child interactions. Okay, oops, sorry. Okay, I want to start though by sort of highlighting the larger educational problem that my work is really motivated to try to solve. And that is the issue of the income achievement gap in reading. And here, these are data from the United States, but the situation is pretty similar in Brazil and other countries that have such large income disparities. And basically what we see, what I want to highlight here is these are reading scores for children from the different socioeconomic quintiles in different colors. And what you can see is that when children enter kindergarten, and so in the US, that's when they're 5 years old and they start primary school, there's a large gap already in their reading scores from the higher and versus lower socioeconomic backgrounds. And the other thing you can notice based on this data is that the gap doesn't really get much smaller across the school years, right? So what this highlights is that this income achievement gap in reading grows most during the first 5 years when children aren't even in school yet, and then it remains relatively large. So of course we have many programs in schools to try to reduce these gaps, but what this sort of says to me and where my work is focused is on understanding what's going on during those first 5 years to try to shrink those gaps before they become so large. So when we think about this issue in early childhood and we think about reading, we have to think about, well, what is reading in early childhood, right? Children don't really start school reading textbooks. And we know, we've learned a lot about this, and we learned that one of the primary early indicators of later reading success and school success more broadly is children's vocabulary, okay? So for example, this slide just sort of shows you a general finding in the literature that we have this large achievement gap between socioeconomic status and children's 4th grade reading comprehension, which is a very common measure of literacy skills and school success. And what we see is that the vocabulary size that children have when they get to kindergarten sort of explains that relationship, right? And so what this suggests, which is really important, is that if we can build children's vocabularies by the time they start school, regardless of their socioeconomic status, that should set them up to succeed for the literacy learning and school success more broadly. So my work has really been focused on understanding this early childhood period and on understanding the nature of this relationship between parent background and socioeconomic status and children's early vocabulary growth. Okay, so what do we know about this topic? Well, decades ago, Hart and Risley did a study that became pretty famous showing that what they called this 30 million word gap in how many words children hear, whether they're in higher and lower income families. So the idea is that they found in their small study that the higher income parents talked a lot more to their children, 30 million words more over the early childhood period than the lower income parents. And that this translated into different trajectories of language development for the children. So the message at this time was talk a lot to your children, right? It's really important, talk a lot, talk all the time. And that's what the message that came out in the press. But a lot of work has been done since this study. And so we've learned a lot more about the nature of the home environment and the types of interactions that really promote learning in young children. So as an example, if you take this pie chart and you think of this circle here as all the variation in young children when they arrive at school in their vocabulary size. How do we explain this variability, right? Well, what we know now is if you look at parent-child interactions in the home environment during the early years, it's the quality of those interactions that explains most of the variation, not the quantity. So that little green slice is the quantity, the part that Hart and Risley were emphasizing. But really, it's the quality, it's the nature of the interactions that plays a stronger role. Okay, so what does quality mean? That's kind of vague, right? Well, one way to sort of sum it up, what we've really come to in the field, is this focus on conversations. So basically, It's this difference between engaging the child in a back and forth conversation versus just talking and talking, or having speech around the child and not having the child be part of it. So a lot of people have been studying conversations because we've learned that it's such a powerful experience for young kids. And so this is the examples of one of our studies recently by my former student, Rachel Romeo. And she found basically that it was the number of conversational turns in the home. And so that's a term we use to mean the back and forths that related very strongly to children's language skills. And that this relationship was explained by the children's brain processing when they listen to language. So basically what this suggests is that engaging in conversations at home helps children process the language that they're hearing, which then helps build their language skills. And what was interesting about this study is that these were all lower income 4-year-olds in the Boston area, but it wasn't the amount of talk they heard that made a difference, and it wasn't the amount that they spoke. It was the back and forth. So there's something, language is a very social experience. Language learning is a social process, and that socialness is a big part of it. Okay, so I want to tell you just a little bit about what we've learned about what these conversations look like over development, right? Because we need to think about early childhood as sort of a long period, right? From birth to age 5. And a conversation, I bet you can imagine, with a little baby like here on the screen would not look or sound the same as a conversation with a 4-year-old over here on the right-hand side. So we've learned a lot about the types of interactions that promote learning in children of different ages over the early childhood period. Now, one thing that it says here across the top that we know is helpful at all these ages is caregivers who are responsive, who produce contingent talk, so like on the topic that the child is focused on, and that they have a fluid and connected communication. And basically that is just the definition of a conversation, right? But when we get into this a little further, we can look at, well, what does that mean for a 1-year-old? Or what does that mean for a 3-year-old or 5-year-old? And so what we've learned, just to highlight, is that with babies, with infants, the type of talk and conversations that's the most helpful for them is when parents are repeating words and when you're talking about what we call the here and now. So what is basically right in front of the child. So infants, 1-year-olds, they learn the most when you talk to them about what they can see right in front of them. And if you point at things and label them, right, that's how they learn based on their cognitive skills at that age. When children get a little bit older, toddlers, for example, you can keep them in conversations by asking questions, and because they can actually answer. You can ask, where's the doggy? And they can point to the picture in the book, or you can say, what's that? And they can say cow. And you can use more diverse and sophisticated vocabulary because kids at this age can handle it, and it's actually really helpful. And then with slightly older children in the preschool years, we can see that decontextualized talk. So here, this is a long word, but all it really means is talk that is more abstract and not in the here and now. So it's in the there and then. So talk about the past, or talk about the future, or explanations about how things in the world work. That's the most interesting and helpful type of talk you can engage in with preschool children. And that type of talk also tends to involve more words and more syntactic complexity on the part of the speaker, which we know is really helpful. So this is just an overview of what we've learned from our work and the work of others about the types of interactions in home that are helpful for children. And so what we've done in my lab, in my work, is we've tried to translate this for parents into little interventions that are sort of designed for parents of different ages. So for the parents of preschoolers, we focus on the decontextualized talk. For the parents of 1-year-olds, we focus on the gesture and talking about the here and now. And the reason we're targeting parents is because one thing that we've learned, just to highlight quickly, is that parents' knowledge about these topics actually makes a really big difference. So for example, we've conducted a bunch of research looking at the socioeconomic differences in parent input. So the fact that parents from different socioeconomic backgrounds talk in different ways with their children. And one of the factors that's sort of a malleable factor that we found makes a difference is parents' knowledge and their beliefs about child development and their mindset. So just for example, parents who know more about child development and parents who think that they can make a difference in their child's development tend to be the parents who use language at home that promotes learning. And so the idea here is that if we can give parents that knowledge and provide them with that information, then it doesn't really matter what the socioeconomic status is or the education level. As long as we can present the information in an understandable way, then they could take that information and know more about what their children are capable of and about how they can influence their children's learning going forward. So that's what we try to do in our work. And just an example, a quick example of one intervention. So here we wanted to focus on parents of preschoolers. This is work led by my former student, Katie Leach. And so we took all that research on decontextualized language and translated it into what we called ready talk, right? So here we said to parents, okay, so your talk is a great way to get your child ready for kindergarten. These are parents of 4-year-olds who are going to go to kindergarten next year. And we made it, we always make these interventions as videos that we show to parents in a home visiting setting. But here what we do is each letter of ready in English, we translate it into a type of talk that the parents would understand because they are already engage in this type of talk with their children. So it's not learning something new, it's just understanding that what you're already doing is helpful. So the R in ready stands for recall past events. So all that means is talk to your children about stuff that you've done together in the past. You know, you went to the park last week or to grandmother's house or even a book you read or a show you watched. Just talk about things that you've done together in the past. And we know that that's really helpful for learning for preschool age children. The E is explain unfamiliar words and concepts. So providing explanations about how things work in the world. The A is asking questions, particularly open-ended questions that require the child to provide a verbal answer. And the D, is discuss future events. So talking about the future, what might happen, helps children learn language and also think about planning skills. And then the Y is a sort of mindset efficacy piece. You can make a difference in your child's future academic success. So helping the parent understand that the way they interact with the child really makes a large difference in that child's learning during early childhood. So this is an example of the types of information that we give to parents. And in this particular intervention, it was a 15-minute video that has examples of parent-child interaction embedded in it so that they can see what these conversations look like. And then just some quick results. Basically, that particular intervention, we did a pilot study with middle-class families. And we found that the families that participated in the intervention, we had them record their meal times before and after the intervention at different time points. And basically the intervention itself, just participating in it and learning about this information for the parents, resulted in more turn taking for the intervention group, and also more turn taking with this type of talk that we were explaining to them. So talk about the past, asking questions, etc. So it seemed like this population of parents really got it. They understood what we were saying, and they increased in these types of talk and also in their conversations, which is what we're after. And so what you can see about this is we only worked with the parents, but what's exciting is that the children just went along with them. They're able to participate in the conversations, and the back and forth turns are increasing, which is what we're hoping for. Okay, so just to conclude, all of this work, what we've been finding is that if we want to try to reduce these income achievement gaps in vocabulary and reading, there's a few important ways that we're addressing this. First, it's important to understand that these disparities appear early, right? And that they're due, at least in part, to children's conversational experiences at home. The approach we've been taking is to try to target some of these specific experiences by providing parents with information in the hope that that might help reduce SES-related gaps in early language development. And then the challenge, of course, is figuring out whom these interventions might work for and why they work for some people and not others, and how to do this at scale. And that's something we're thinking a lot about now, just given this COVID-19 situation. Our interventions are videos, but we've always done them in a home visiting situation where you have more contact with the families, but we're thinking now about how to do this perhaps virtually. Okay, so thank you. I think I'll stop there and Again, I'm happy to answer any questions and engage in conversation as we go along. Thanks so much.
Thank you, Meredith.